They know their why and live by it. That simple truth is what separates the 5% of women who rise from the ones who remain stuck. When a woman knows her why, she is no longer swayed by public opinion, by fear, or by the need to be liked. She doesn't chase validation because her compass is internal. She doesn't get distracted by trends, fads, or external noise. She wakes up with clarity, and that clarity gives her power. It gives her direction. And most importantly, it gives her the ability to say no to things that don't align, to people who drain her, to habits that waste her energy. A woman without a why can be brilliant, but aimless. She might have talent, drive, beauty, and intellect, but without direction, all of that gets scattered. She tries everything. She says yes to everyone. She exhausts herself trying to be everything to everyone. And eventually she burns out. But when she finds her why, her life becomes focused. She becomes precise. She doesn't need to chase every opportunity, because now she knows which ones truly matter. Knowing your why is not just a motivational phrase, it is a mindset. It's the difference between reacting and responding, between surviving and leading. The 5% of women who operate from this mindset don't allow circumstances to dictate their identity. They don't fold when life gets messy. They lean into their purpose with resilience. When they fall, they don't spiral. They reflect, adjust, and return to their purpose. And because of that, they carry a presence, a quiet strength that people can feel without a single word being spoken. This kind of woman doesn't settle for a job just to pay the bills. She seeks work that fulfills a greater mission. If she's in a relationship, it's not because she needs someone to complete her. It's because she wants someone who aligns with her purpose. She doesn't allow romance to blur her vision. She doesn't let loneliness convince her to lower her standards. She knows that being alone with clarity is better than being surrounded in confusion. And when life tests her, and it always does, she doesn't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead, she asks, "What is this teaching me?" Because her purpose is not fragile. Her why is not tied to comfort or convenience. It's rooted in something deeper, something that doesn't fade when things get hard. That's why the 5% rise. They're not immune to pain or failure. They just know what they're working toward. And that knowing gives them the patience to endure, the vision to keep going, and the wisdom to say no to distractions. She's not chasing a title, or likes on social media, or surface-level success. She's building something real, a legacy, a life that reflects her truth, not someone else's expectations. And she's willing to make sacrifices for that. She's willing to be misunderstood. She's willing to be judged, because she knows that not everyone will understand her path, and that's okay. Her life is not about fitting in. It's about standing firm. It's about choosing impact over approval, depth over popularity, authenticity over image. And here's what's powerful about a woman who knows her why. She becomes unshakable. Life can throw storms at her, but she's anchored. People can walk away, but she doesn't shrink, because her value is not negotiable. It's not up for debate. She's not here to be liked. She's here to live with meaning. And she knows that meaning isn't found in comfort. It's forged in the fire. In the moments where others give up, she digs deeper. Not because it's easy, but because her why demands it. The 5% of women who live this way are not louder, they're clearer. They don't need to prove anything. Their actions speak for them. Their discipline shows up in how they move, how they speak, how they choose, and how they live. She's been doing this work for 23 years. She's been the first to show up in how they move, how they speak, how they choose. They don't live chaotically, they live intentionally. They don't get paralyzed by what-ifs. They make decisions grounded in who they are, and what they're here to do. That clarity makes them magnetic, not in a performative way, but in a way that draws respect, quiet confidence, deep impact, real strength. That's what happens when a woman knows her why and lives by it. They set boundaries without apology. The women who belong to the 5% understand that boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They don't push people away, they protect what matters. These women are not cruel, cold, or indifferent. They are clear, and in that clarity, they create space for real respect. They don't tolerate disrespect disguised as closeness. They don't stay quiet just to keep the peace. They don't smile when they feel violated. They speak up, not to create conflict, but to protect their own peace. When a woman sets a boundary, she is not trying to be difficult. She is choosing herself. She is saying, this is where I end and you begin. And that distinction is powerful, because when a woman doesn't set boundaries, she ends up losing herself. She overgives, she over-explains, she over-apologizes. She stretches herself thin in the name of love, friendship, or loyalty, and slowly resentment builds. She starts to feel invisible, not because others can't see her, but because she stopped showing up for herself. The 5% don't allow that. They don't make excuses for people who continue to cross the line. They don't explain their standards 10 times to those who don't respect them the first time. They know that a boundary doesn't need to come with an essay. A boundary needs consistency. It needs action. It needs the courage to enforce it even when it's uncomfortable. Because comfort isn't the goal, alignment is. Energy is sacred to them. Time is sacred. Peace is sacred. And if someone disrupts that, they are not afraid to step back. They don't need permission to protect their space. They don't ask for approval before honoring their limits. They don't beg people to understand them. They are not rude, but they are real. And in being real, they teach people how to treat. They've rejected the belief that silence is strength. They've walked away from the lie that enduring abuse or disrespect is noble. Instead, they've chosen to speak up, step away, and stay grounded. They know that walking away doesn't mean weakness, it means wisdom. It means knowing your worth. It means choosing yourself, even when others don't understand. When they say no, it's final. Not because they lack compassion, but because they've given too many yeses in the past that cost them their health, their dreams, but that presence is made possible by the boundaries they keep. They give generously, but not endlessly. They love deeply, but not blindly. And they support others, but not at the cost of abandoning themselves. Their yes is powerful because it comes from a place of truth. Their no is sacred because it comes from a place of wisdom. They've stopped trying to fix people who don't want to grow. They've stopped setting themselves on fire to keep others warm. They no longer measure their worth by how much they can endure. They've chosen alignment over approval, peace over performance, and truth over tradition. And in doing so, they've found their power. Not in domination, but in discernment. Not in being loud, but in being sure. Not in controlling others, but in controlling access. That is what separates the 5%. They live by boundaries, they enforce them with love, and they grow stronger every time they do. They embrace discomfort to grow. The women in the 5% don't run from the hard things. They don't hide when life gets uncomfortable, uncertain, or painful. They lean in. They understand that growth doesn't come in moments of ease. It comes when things get messy, when fears rise, when comfort zones are shattered. They don't avoid struggle. They study it. They use it. They allow it to refine them, not define them. Pain is not their enemy. It's their teacher. Discomfort is not a signal to stop. It's a signal to pay attention, to evolve, to shift into something stronger. These women aren't waiting for life to hand them perfect conditions. They know that waiting for the perfect moment is a trap. There is no perfect time. There is no painless path. There's just now, just this moment, and the courage to do what most people avoid. They willingly step into discomfort because they've learned that every breakthrough is born from pressure. Diamonds don't form in comfort. Leaders don't rise in ease. Wisdom isn't gained through safety. The women in the 5% walk straight into what others run from, because they know the discomfort is temporary, but the growth is future, even if it's hard, especially if it's hard. They aren't addicted to feeling good. They're committed to becoming whole. And they understand that wholeness comes from facing what's broken, from acknowledging the cracks, the wounds, the doubts, and walking through them anyway. They don't numb the pain. They don't distract themselves with noise. They sit with it. They reflect. They ask questions. They journal. They pray. They allow the tension to reveal the truth, because they know that clarity comes in the quiet, in the struggle, in the fire. They don't try to escape their reality. It feels safe, but it's suffocating. That fitting in kills authenticity. That avoiding failure leads to regret. So they choose discomfort over regret, growth over approval, truth over convenience. They don't fake it. They don't pretend to have it all figured out. They're willing to look foolish, to make mistakes, to fall and rise again, because they've learned that every version of their future self is waiting on the other side of discomfort. They don't surround themselves with people who coddle their fears. They choose environments that challenge them, people who hold them accountable, mentors who stretch their thinking. They seek feedback, not flattery. They ask hard questions. They dig deeper. They confront the habits, the patterns, the mindsets that no longer serve them, not because it's fun, but because it's necessary. Because comfort might feel good in the short term, but it never leads to greatness. They understand that discomfort is where character is formed, where grit is forged, where emotional intelligence is built. Every time they choose the uncomfortable path, having the tough conversation, leaving the unhealthy relationship, starting the new chapter, they build trust in themselves. They become more resilient, more grounded, more real. They don't need perfect conditions to rise. They rise because they've learned how to lead themselves in the dark, how to breathe through the fear, how to keep moving when nothing makes sense. They don't glamorize the struggle, but they don't fear it either. They respect the process. They know that pain is not a punishment, it's a pathway. And that every time they face what's uncomfortable, they're expanding their capacity for life, for love, for leadership, for purpose. They don't settle for ease, they choose impact. They're not trying to survive, they're trying to transform. And that transformation comes at a cost. The cost is discomfort, and they pay it. Willingly, consistently, quietly, because they know who they're becoming is worth it. They uplift others instead of competing. The women in the 5% understand that real strength is not found in tearing others down, but in building others up. They are not intimidated by another woman's success, beauty, intelligence, or presence. Instead, they celebrate it. They see another woman's win as a reflection of what's possible, not as a threat to their own journey. Their confidence is quiet, grounded, and deeply rooted in their own sense of identity. They don't need to dim someone else's light to feel seen. They know who they are, and because of that, they can genuinely support others without comparison or jealousy. These women don't gossip behind closed doors. They don't entertain conversations that belittle or degrade other women. They don't participate in competition that is rooted in insecurity. Doesn't mean their own delay. They trust their process. They stay in their lane. And they look sideways, not to compete, but to connect, to learn, to grow, to share wisdom. The 5% know that comparison is a distraction and envy is a poison. So they choose a different path, a higher one built on mutual respect, shared empowerment, and honest sisterhood. They understand that jealousy is often just a signal, an indication of what you desire but haven't yet pursued. Instead of letting that feeling turn into bitterness, they use it as fuel, as a mirror, as motivation to work on themselves. They don't resent what someone else has. They ask themselves what it would take to build something of their own. They take responsibility for their emotions. They don't blame. They don't project. They don't compete with other women because they're too busy competing with their own past. These women are the ones who share opportunities instead of hoarding them, who recommend other women for positions, platforms, and roles, who connect people, who mentor, who encourage, who use their voice not to dominate, but to elevate. They're not afraid to say, "You inspired me." They're not too proud to say, "Teach me how you did that." They're not afraid to say, "You inspired me." They're not too proud to say, "Teach me." And they know that helping someone else rise doesn't take anything away from their own journey. It adds to it. It deepens their impact. It expands their reach. It multiplies their legacy. They don't see success as a limited resource. They understand that there's room for everyone at the table, and if there isn't, they build a bigger table. If there isn't, they build a bigger table. They don't isolate themselves in competition. They rise in community. They're the kind of women who walk into a room and make everyone feel capable, not because they need to be admired, but because they see potential in people, even when others don't. They know the power of words, the weight of encouragement, the impact of presence, and they use that power with intention. They've experienced what it feels like to be dismissed, excluded, misunderstood, and overlooked. And because of that, they choose to include, they choose to uplift, they choose to offer what they once needed. They are generous with praise, but honest in correction. They don't flatter, they empower. They don't enable, they guide. They want to see others win, not just because it feels good, but because they understand that collective success is stronger than isolated achievement. They create spaces where others feel safe to grow, to fail, to try again. They don't mock people who are just starting. They remember what it felt like to be a beginner. They don't mock the hustle. They honor it. They don't look down on anyone because they've worked through the dark seasons too. They've cried, doubted, struggled, and yet chose to rise. And now that they're rising, they extend a hand back. They open doors. They share wisdom. They remind others that they are not alone on the journey. They are not just dreamers, they are encouragers. They are not just strong, they are generous with their strength. They make decisions from vision, not fear. The women who belong to the rare 5% don't let fear dictate their direction. They recognize fear, they respect it, but they do not obey it. They've learned that fear is loud, urgent, and often rooted in past wounds or future anxieties. Vision, on the other hand, is quiet, steady, and rooted in purpose. These women choose to move toward what they are building, not away from what they're afraid of losing. They don't let the fear of failure, judgment, or rejection rob them of progress. They understand that living in fear keeps you small, reactive, and stagnant, while living by vision keeps you growing, intentional, and bold. When a woman operates from vision, her decisions are aligned with who she is becoming, not just who she has been. She doesn't let her past define her potential. She makes choices that reflect where she wants to go, not where she's been stuck. She invests her time, energy, and heart into things that stretch her, not shrink her. Fear wants comfort. Vision demands courage. And the women in the 5% choose courage every single time. Even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable, because they know growth doesn't happen inside the safety zone. It happens the moment they say, "I will not let fear decide for me." They've learned to listen to the still, clear voice inside them that knows their worth, knows their calling, and knows their capacity. Fear tries to cloud that voice with doubt and insecurity. But vision cuts through the noise. It reminds them why they started, why they fought, why they got back up after life knocked them down. Vision tells the truth. And even when the truth is uncomfortable, they trust it. They'd rather face hard truths than live in soft illusions. That's what makes them different. That's what gives them power. They don't say yes to things just to avoid disappointing others. They don't stay in places, relationships, or careers that no longer align just because it feels safer than the unknown. They know that choosing fear may keep them secure for a moment, but it will cost them their soul in the long run. Vision pushes them to take the risk, speak the truth, take the leap, and start again if they must. Vision stretches them toward a life that reflects their values, not their insecurities. And that difference changes everything. When fear shows up, and it always does, they don't run. They pause. They listen. They examine. They ask, is this fear rooted in wisdom, or is it trying to keep me from becoming who I'm meant to be? And when they discern that fear is simply the echo of an old story, they release it. They don't let old pain write new chapters. They choose to write from vision, from possibility, from belief. They don't make decisions based on what other people will think. They're not trying to impress anyone. They're trying to fulfill a calling, and that calling is louder than the crowd. They don't play small just to fit into other people's comfort zones. They understand that vision requires letting go of who they used to be so they can fully embrace who they are becoming. That shedding process is never easy, but it's worth it. Every time they let go of fear, they step more fully into their power. These women don't let temporary emotions dictate permanent decision. They feel the fear, but they don't make it the driver. They let it ride in the back seat, while vision takes the wheel. Fear can advise, but it doesn't get to choose. And when things don't go as planned, they don't spiral into regret. They reflect, they recalibrate, they continue. Insecurities, but remind them of their strength. They're careful with their circle, because fear is contagious, but so is courage. And they choose courage again and again, not because they're fearless, but because they've trained themselves to act in spite of it. They trust the process, even when it's slow. They know that real transformation is not always immediate, but it's always worth it. They're not building a life that looks good on the outside, but feels empty inside. They're building a life that reflects who they truly are. And to do that, every decision must be filtered through vision, not fear. Vision that challenges them, refines them, and elevates them to new levels of clarity and conviction.